Let's now get more political reactions from political parties. We're joined by Sibusiso Mwane, ATM spokesperson. Mr. Mwane, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Globe. And what's your reaction to the President's address?
Thanks very much, and good evening to the listeners. Well, as the ATM, we note what the President has said tonight. And honestly, we were expecting that the country should move back to alert level 3. We've seen the decline on infections. But when it comes to the issues of gatherings, we are concerned that the churches continues to be given that 50-50 in attendance. Remember, a few days ago, it's the government that has called for the National Day of Prayer. And with that, it means that the President and his cabinet have confidence on the faith-based organization, that is the churches. We're therefore expecting that at least the number will be increased to 100 because even the government see the necessity to have churches functioning, the church leaders leading the moral regeneration in this current situation. We're expecting that at least the number will be increased because that's a very important constituency of the society, especially after what has happened was Natal and Gauteng. We're a little bit disappointed on that. We think the government that the President should have given much bigger space for the church gatherings. But however, also, we believe that the President tonight missed two opportunities, important opportunities, to talk about Phoenix massacre, what has happened there. In as much as the police is responsible for arresting, but as a head of state, he should have said something because families have lost their loved ones. And it cannot be treated as a minor thing. They cannot downplay what happened in Phoenix. Number two, his own cabinet ministers, the security cluster, have not only embarrassed him, but as the country at large. Maybe he should have also used this opportunity to even reshuffle his cabinet. What we saw previous days was embarrassing in the security cluster. It left us as a country wanting whether we have the security cluster, whether we have intelligence in this country or not. Those are the things that we think the President tonight have missed, and they are critical as far as the ATM is concerned.
Now, Mr. Ngwane, you say that the President should have allowed churches to conduct much bigger, sessions or religious sessions, as it were. Yeah. Are you cognizant of the fact that it could spark a domino effect, because all the other sectors might be propelled to ask the President or request the President to allow them to host bigger gatherings, for instance, the entertainment sector?
Well, put simply, churches in its own nature is the most sober constituency, the most disciplined sector. They comply with all regulations. Those are the people who are there for 2 hours and they are out. They know what to do. They are complying with the government regulations. They are leaders because the church leaders are also leaders of society. They provide spiritual counseling. In this area where people are losing their loved ones, they are losing their jobs, the majority of those people will look up to their leaders, spiritual leaders, for some counseling. Now, you cannot equate them to any other sector, to any other constituency. Church leaders are the most important people in our society. They provide that kind of spiritual counseling that even goes to the extent of giving hope and boost the immune system of our people. So you cannot equate them to entertainment, to bars, to restaurants. You cannot do that. They are the very important constituents in terms of both psychologically and spiritual counseling.
All right, Mr. Mngcwabe, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. African Transformation Movement spokesperson Cyril Ramaphosa sharing his party's reflection and reaction to the president's address earlier on. Now, staying with religious matters, we're now joined by Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, the leader of the African Christian Democratic Party. Mr. Meshwe, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe. What's your reaction to the president's address?
Yeah, good evening, Simpiwe, and to all your listeners. We are relieved that restrictions that have held us back in a number of ways have been eased. We are glad that we have been moved from adjusted lockdown level 4 to lockdown level 3. That will enable us to do a number of things that were of great concern to us as a nation. Now, we know that churches obviously have been complaining and asking government that they need to meet. And this past week, I also wrote a letter to the president saying to him that in the light of the attempted coup that he spoke about, there needs to be a Christians meeting in churches to make collective prayers for the nation so that we can have peace in the land. So we are glad that he considered that, among others, even though he says maximum of 50 members. It is definitely better than nothing. And also we are happy to hear that restaurants will be opened because by that, jobs will be saved. We were concerned that the jobs are being lost, particularly even when one looks at what happened this past week during the looting. So we are happy that restaurants will be open, and we are aware that the tourism industry has also been complaining. They will also be relieved to hear that interprovincial travel for leisure is now allowed. It's going to resume. So there are a number of issues that were of concern to us that are being taken care of. We are also happy as the ACDP to hear that the 350 rand social grant for those who are poor, for those who do not have other incomes, will be allowed, will be reintroduced until March 2022. Now, to hear that measures will be introduced to help assist businesses, particularly those who are not insured. During the damage that has been taking place last week, for example, I was in Soweto, and I met a number of business owners who said they lost everything and they don't have money to rebuild their businesses. So to hear government say, the president say, they have set aside a fund for businesses that were not insured is a welcome relief for those businesses that did not have anything. And those, obviously, that were also insured are also not going to be neglected because the president said they are going to work with SASRIA to look at all the claims that have been made to ensure that they also get assistance. It is a good thing when businesses get assistance because the more businesses are healthy, the more people will be employed. The more people are employed, and the more poverty will be reduced. And now the other issue that was of interest to me was to hear him talk about healing the divisions of the past. Now, it is not only divisions of the past. We know that as a result of the looting that was taking place this past 2 weeks, that racial tensions have been created in some areas, including in Phoenix and in the KZN. So we believe that those divisions must be healed, and we believe that people must be told that we all must be nation builders. And as nation builders, we need to grow above the color of the skin of a person. We need to work together to rebuild the South Africa because this is a great country that together from different race groups, we can make South Africa become a winning nation. One of the things that really blessed me and made me happy during the looting was to see racial groups coming together. After the destruction of properties, cleaning the malls, working together, blacks, whites, Indians, and colors. And in some areas, those who were protecting their neighborhood, they were standing shoulder to shoulder, people of different racial backgrounds. So for the new South Africa to truly be a winning nation, we need all nations, all race groups to work together and not to fight together. We must all resist all those who are trying to sow divisions among us so that we start attacking one another. This is a beautiful country that I believe together we can make it a winning nation among nations of the world.
Reverend, what's your observation of just how COVID-19 compliant churches are here in South Africa as some of these restrictions will be eased?
In the circles I move, all churches that I visited and all churches that I interact with and hear what they are saying, they are all supporting and all implementing all health protocols because they do not want to be shut down because of not upholding health protocols. And many of them also, including myself, are still questioning the fact and the allegation that the church is a super spreader because those who are observing the health protocols, I maintain that they are not they are not spreaders of COVID-19. So those churches that I know of, they are observing all the protocols, and because of it, they do not have infections. Interestingly, recently I asked, since COVID started last year, I asked some of our members, tell me how many people in our church were infected in the church by COVID, and they said they only know one person last year and who had other comorbidities. That person also had a heart condition, so they cannot exclusively say it was COVID because that person had gathered in the church gathering. So I'm saying the churches that I am in touch with are all observing all required health protocols.
Reverend Kenneth Mesher, leader of the African Christian Democratic Party, joining us on the line. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got more reaction. Let's now welcome John Steenhuisen, leader of the Democratic Alliance, joining us on the line. Mr. Steenhuisen, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe. First of all, what's your reaction to the President's address?
Well, I think there were some good things announced this evening. I think the business support, particularly the holidays on statutory payments, I think are going to provide some relief to businesses that have been horribly battered. The 350 as well, the extension of that's going to be a huge relief to many hungry households and people who've lost their jobs and the decimation of the economy. But I think there was one thing missing this evening, and that was the accountability. I would have expected the announcement of a new health minister. We've had an acting health minister for 6.5 weeks in the midst of what the president himself called the largest health crisis we're facing in South Africa, in post-democratic South Africa. Why are we sitting without a health minister? Why are we sitting with an acting health minister who's got to juggle two portfolios? Why are we, as the president was speaking tonight about the looting and the damage that's been done and the impact it's had on South Africa, are we still sitting with the security cluster sitting around the same table making the same bad decisions? I think what South Africans were looking for tonight was some form of accountability and a notion that the president had heard them. The country's in a deep, deep crisis, and it's not going to help to have those same people that have got us into this mess sitting around the table. And I think the president could have taken South Africans into his confidence this evening around that. I also think it's frankly outrageous that Parliament is not sitting. The country is burning. It's literally in crisis on a number of fronts, economic, social, political, health-wise, and yet Parliament hasn't been reconvened. I couldn't think of more than the events of the last 2 weeks that would justify a reopening or recalling of Parliament, and yet the Speaker remains obstinate and does not want to recall Parliament. And I think this is when South Africa needs not heads in the sand. I think South Africa needs cool heads around the tables in government and in the legislatures, looking at ways in which we're going to save the situation and move the country forward out of this crisis and into safer waters. That can't happen in the current setup.
Mr. John Steenhuisen, remember that when the country was first thrust into lockdown level 5 at the beginning of last year, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a stimulus package that would help cushion all businesses, in particular the small businesses, against the impact of COVID-19. And he's been widely criticized with how he handled the situation. So now that he's announced a business survival mechanism and a fund for most businesses which have been uninsured and those businesses that have been affected by the recent looting, how do you propose that the authorities, in particular the presidency, handles the distribution of such funds?
Well, I think they've got to get it into the hands of some form of private sector distribution, because what we've seen very clearly is that government distribution doesn't work. And whether it's been the UIF and TERS procedure, which is a complete mess, there's still people from the first round waiting for their payments on the UIF and TERS. I think that there needs to be some form of other mechanism to clear it as quickly as possible. It's very important that those funds get into the hands of businesses as quickly as possible. Many of our businesses in South Africa are hanging on by their fingernails. They've been battered. They've been damaged by the pandemic. They've been damaged by poor economic policies. And this last wave of violence in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng, I think, has also put the country in a very, very difficult space. And businesses, particularly, you've now got to deal with these losses on top of what they've already gone through. And so I don't think that whatever stimulus package has been in place to date has had the effect. It hasn't bridged many businesses over this period. They've shut down, and it's evidenced by the unemployment figures that have soared during this period. And I think that what the president wants to save businesses, he's got to get that money into those businesses as quickly as possible. We don't have time for racial bean counting and all these sorts of bureaucratic processes that we saw in the previous incarnations of it. We've got to give that money into those businesses. Otherwise, they're going to shut their doors, they're not going to reopen, and we're going to have an even bigger unemployment crisis waiting us at the end of this tunnel.
John Steenhuisen, leader of the Democratic Alliance, joining us on the line. Thank you so much for your time. You do appreciate it. Let's now move on to Veronica Mente, the EFF spokesperson, or from the EFF rather. Veronica, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe. What's EFF's reaction to the President's address?
Thank you very much for having us. The national chairperson of the EFF. Today we had a president who's rather not having a direction in terms of how to resolve the problems that we find ourselves in a country. There have been two, or rather there's three crises in the country, one being the pandemic, another one being the unemployment, and the third one has been the recent activities that have taken place in majority in KZN and Gauteng. So today we're expecting to hear a clear plan, firstly on how to curb the situation of the pandemic, and there is only one solution, is a vaccination. I heard the president talking about extending the days and ensuring that they are establishing more sites of vaccination. That is very much welcome. However, as I speak to you now, I just can't get off the call from some of the constituency offices of our members in the Eastern Cape and KZN that the vaccines have run out. And that on its own is a worrying factor, because if you are going to extend vaccination sites, yet there is not enough supply in the country. However, we do have other countries that have offered to give us vaccines, like Russia and China. China's vaccine has been authorized by SABC, but yet we haven't seen the procurement and the supply of such vaccine coming into the country and being rolled out effectively. Instead, we're hearing of the Johnson & Johnson, which is on its own having a lot of side effects on many people. And the second thing where vaccine is concerned is the number of nurses that the country or the government should have employed currently in order to make sure that they administer these vaccines to the people. It's quite a worrisome factor again, because there isn't enough human resource to provide or administer the vaccines to especially the far-flung areas like rural provinces, Limpopo, KZN, Western Cape. Even though they are sites, but there are no human resource to do the job. So secondly is the issue that of the recent activities that we have seen. We have seen people crying out loud to the government, trying to beg the government to listen to them. But we have seen the response of government to those cries that was a response of people who do not care at all, a response of the military. And today we see a response of the very same military and the same government, which is collecting food from people's homes, people who are hungry, people who have now had some kind of hope that we are going to have food eventually. But that on its own, for people to be scavenging for food in your own country, you should be ashamed as a president and ask yourself a question: why would my people even go and scavenge? Why would my people go and put themselves in such situations? It can only mean one thing, that they don't have food to put on their table. How about taking their kids to school? How do they afford to get health care? How do they afford to clothe themselves? How do they afford to have shelter? I ought to have gone down as government and listened to them instead of using them as a tool to fight my factional battles as a president with my other president. And within the ANC itself, we haven't seen leaders going to listen to the people. And we have not seen a decisive action taken by the president, neither the security cluster, to ensure that they are arresting the thugs who have brutally killed the Africans in KZN. Today we had a president who was rather encouraging and applauding vigilantism, that people took a stand against violence. Once more, a president is making a rather very problematic and malicious statement to say people were standing against violence. So if you define violence, it means the people that went out to protest against the state of their social welfare.
Ms. Menta, we're out of time, unfortunately, but just a quick question. The EFF has previously called on South Africans to defy President Cyril Ramaphosa's level 4 lockdown regulations until there is a clear vaccination plan. Now that President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced that, the country now administers 240,000 vaccine doses per day, which was a big jump from the 100,000 daily doses just a month ago. So what's the EFF stance on this particular, on this particular matter? Is the EFF still adamant that people should go on and defy the lockdown regulations?
Of course, they can do better than that. As I've said, they are not employing nurses to administer vaccines. They are not opening sites. They are not procuring a readily available and authorized vaccine from China. They are busy waiting for Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson that is coming from the West. So it matters not what he says today to say we have extended, for as long as there are no sites that are sufficient for the people to get their vaccine within no time, as in yesterday. We are going to defy it because it's within his powers, it's within his cabinet powers to ensure that there are vaccine sites, there is enough supply of vaccine, there is enough human resource within those vaccine sites. There is even an issue where you go to rural areas that the vaccines cannot be administered because people cannot be registered from sites. There is no network, there is no internet, there is even no data. What kind of government that does not have data? What kind of government that doesn't make sure that there is internet? So if ever we are hearing such things that the government have to resolve, is within their ambit to make sure that things are smooth where vaccination is concerned for the people. We are not going to listen to Ramaphosa, who is creating a problem for ourselves, a problem that he knows how to resolve.
All right, Ms. Menta, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. That was Veronica Menta from the Economic Freedom Fighters and sharing with us the party's reaction to the president's address. Let's get some more reaction. We're now joined on the line by Mr. Wouter Wessels from the FF+. Mr. Wessels, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe. And what's your reaction to the president's address?
Good evening, Sir Piwe. I think a bit confusion. I'm Dr. Pieter Groenewald, leader of the Freedom Front Plus. Firstly, my reaction is that it is a more rational approach. Secondly, we do ask the question, the support package and economic support that is going to be available to small and medium businesses, whether we're going to have a repetition like in the past when it came to tourism, that it is going to be only available to BEE companies, and where other businesses, where it is very difficult to comply to that, whether they're going to be excluded. We are also supporting the fact that the schools must open tomorrow. Our children are paying a dear price. When it comes to the violence in KZN, the president didn't say anything new. In fact, it was a repetition, and he repeated what he said about a week ago on the Friday evening. I would have liked to hear more political steps the president is going to take as far as his ministers are concerned, because they are part of the creation of the situation where there was not enough intelligence to prevent what have happened. As we speak, as far as the vaccination program is concerned, I can't understand why President Cyril Ramaphosa first wait until he's so deep in trouble that he then go to the private sector and ask for assistance. The Freedom Front Plus is on record that even from last year, we said in the whole process of obtaining the vaccinations, the procurement of it, the role of that whole issue, they must go to the private sector and ask for assistance and support. Together, the government and the private sector would have ensured that many more than 6.4 million people being vaccinated tonight. And we are dealing with this virus, and we have to deal with the different waves of infections because of the lack of the government to act responsibly and correctly, and it actually demonstrates their inability to deal with this issue.
Well, we've heard President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier on having glowing words, on the health sector, in particular the Department of Health, for having administered 240,000 vaccine doses a day, which is a big jump from the 100,000 daily doses which we've seen last month. So what's your analysis of how the country is handling the vaccination program?
Well, it's 250,000 per day, but it's not only the health services. They still already have the support of some private sectors and pharmacies and businesses. He wants to increase it to 300,000 a day. We will welcome that. But again, as I said, he should have obtained the support from the private sector much earlier. I also know that, for instance, certain mines are giving huge support in vaccinating their employees, and that is part of obtaining that 300,000 vaccinations every day.
All right, Dr. Groenewald, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. That was Dr. Peter Groenewald, leader of the FF+. We're now joined on the line by Hanif Hendricks from Al Jama. Mr. Hendricks, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe. What's your reaction to President Ramaphosa's address?
Good evening. We are very encouraged by the address. It's a best of breed package that the President has presented. And Al Jama is thrilled that we are providing the best we can under the present circumstances. I'm a member of the Portfolio Committee on Small Business. My bag is packed. We are going to visit all the affected areas in KZN and Gauteng. The President has set aside some money to assist, especially small businesses that were not insured. And we hope to give, as a portfolio committee and as Parliament, to give guidance to government on how to speed up relief because it is urgently required. If I just take one town like Umzinto, there's 100 businesses, only one survives. And, it sounds like that where we need to move rapidly so that the economy can be revived. We are a bit disappointed that there's not enough comfort given to learners and that only from September those who are 18 years and older will be allowed to be vaccinated. We feel that needs to be looked at. Also, the President has his confidence in religious leaders to address their communities with regard to being vigilant about the regulations. That regulation gives religious leaders carte blanche to actually, in our view, address more than 50 people, especially if they want to have prayer meetings, which can be very effective. A dua can be very effective to get spiritual assistance to deal with the COVID pandemic. But we're very thrilled that the the social welfare measures has been introduced. We were looking forward to a universal income grant, 1,200 rand a month or more, and that would have helped so many people and would have boosted the economy. There would be more spending, and especially these small businesses that need to recover. There will be more traffic coming to their businesses. So we're a bit disappointed that has been delayed, but very happy that caregivers are now given an opportunity to apply for this grant. We think that the President outdid himself under very difficult circumstances. I don't know how he's going to face the Minister of Finance tomorrow morning. The Minister of Finance, must be in a state on how he's going to fund all of this. But we feel that the insurance companies who are now off the hook because government is paying for all the damage, that they should make some extra contributions to the special fund that the President has set aside to help small businesses that haven't been uninsured. So my bags is packed. We are ready to go to KZN and Gauteng, and Parliament is ready to play its role in taking the matter forward. We also know that we need to create 9 million jobs by 2030, and these jobs will largely come from the small business sector. So this is an opportunity to put all the monies together, to put the plans together, and to boost unemployment and to reduce unemployment in the country.
Now, Mr. Hendrik, we've seen the leaders of faith-based organizations and religious organizations lamenting that there's been a lack of consultation with regards to the disaster management regulations. And some of these leaders have been saying that some of these regulations that have been imposed on the religious sector were not necessarily imposed on other sectors of society. What's your thoughts on this? Where do you stand?
Look, the President met with religious leaders and they raised these concerns, and that's why the regulations were amended to allow imams and sheikhs and pastors and religious leaders to address their communities, and there were no restrictions on numbers. In fact, party political leaders were also given that particular leeway. So we have to look and see what the regulations are now, because that facility still exists. Religious leaders can call any event. There's no restrictions on numbers, and address their members, for example, to reduce the impact of the pandemic through prayer, which we feel is very important. Dua in our religion is very important, and prayer in other religions is also very important. And that may be more effective than the regulations. With regard to going to level 3, we haven't seen much silver bullets so that we can eventually be back at level 1, except for relying on the vaccinations. We somehow, although I don't have the answer, we feel more should be done to lower the curve so that we can move to level 1 as soon as possible. And we already see in Britain that all restrictions has been removed. We need to watch the stats there. And talking about statistics, we had an executive medical report by former Deputy Chief Justice Mosheneki.
Okay.
The President needs to look at that report because it differs from his report.
All right. Mr. Hanif Hendricks from the Al Jamaa Party, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Let's now welcome on the line Dennis Bloom, the national spokesperson for the Congress of the People, COPE. Mr. Bloom, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe. What's your reaction to the President's speech earlier?
Good evening, Spiwe, and the viewers. No, we are very disappointed, Spiwe, with the President not announcing. We have expected that the President will announce the new Minister of Health. We don't understand why it is so difficult for the President to fire Zweli Mkhize and to appoint a permanent health minister, because we are faced with a very dangerous enemy, COVID-19. You cannot have an acting minister who must man 2 ministries. It is not possible, because this fight of coronavirus, it's a heavy fight. Now, we can't understand why. It's a month, more than a month ago, that Cyril Ramaphosa was placed on special leave. But up until now, we don't hear anything about it. The second issue is that President Ramaphosa was addressing the issue of the violence and looting of a week ago. But he did not touch anything about these instigators. The president a week ago said to us, to the nation, that they know who's these instigators. They are after their track. But not a single one of them are arrested. It's foot soldiers again that is being arrested. That is totally unacceptable. For as long as these instigators are outside, they are posing a threat to this country. They can strike at any time. The third one is that these security ministers that is fighting each other. Now we can't understand why the president is not getting rid of them, because they themselves are posing a very serious threat to the security of this country. The Minister of Intelligence, Secret Service, the Minister of Police are fighting in the open to say, the Minister of Intelligence is saying that I gave you intelligence. The Minister of Police is saying, no ways, you have never gave me that intelligence. They themselves are posing a very serious threat to this country. We are calling upon the president to fire both of them, so that he must appoint. We want to support the president. We are not fighting the president. We love this country. The president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was elected as a genuine president of this country. We will not fight him. But what we are doing is to protect the country, the constitution and the judiciary. We can never keep quiet when we see that this country is going to the dogs, because that violence of last week was very dangerous. We don't want to see it again. It must not repeat it again. So the instigators must be arrested. The ministers must be fired. The president must appoint suitable ministers that is having the interest of the country at heart to save this country from these instigators.
All right, Mr. Bloom, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time.
You are welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks.